Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to whomever may be watching this. Welcome to one of the many discussion videos I will be having on this channel, and this one is certainly a doozy to start with. I decided to pick up a more recent subject, the best deck of the format. For context, since the 9th of February, we have had a new format with the latest set, PHOTON HYPERNOVA, being legal. And since the 13th of February, we have had a new format where Tier 0, Telement Ishizu, is literally no more. Since that is the case, we have only been having one question for about the last couple of weeks or so. What deck is the best for this format? And I am here to give you some answers to the question. Before we go any further, please bear in mind that this format can change drastically from when I am making and releasing this video. So a lot of this information and opinions are from the current state of when I am recording this, and they are bound to change. So with that, let's get into the changes that this ban list and format bring to the table. To give some context on the information and opinions are being stemmed from, there was a ban list announced a month or so ago that would go into effect on the 13th of February. To cut a long explanation incredibly fucking short, this was a nuke. The last list we had was very small in comparison, and this list killed so many decks that when I first looked at it on Twitter, I thought this was a fucking prank because it was so overkill in comparison. A couple of things to mention for this Forbidden Unlimited list: the limited nature of every single Telement name to 1 apart from Reinhardt, and the banning of Telement kit colors, putting the Ishizu cards to 1, which are all warranted because a lot of them, especially Keldo and Kelbeck, are incredibly fucking strong. They also banned Sprite, of which hits Sprite quite a lot in the sense of its consistency, as well as the previously mentioned Telement, as well as banning, finally, fucking Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, which was one of the ways that Flunder had to be hit in some way, shape or form. But they also have a late unbanning, or limiting, of an errated Ancient Fairy Dragon, which will be coming into effect as of the 10th of March, which makes its effects once per turn, but you can only use it as a hard once per turn. This does nerf the card, but it's also incredibly powerful as it still sees plays in the OCG, while still also being very, very fair for a more balanced type of format. And to give some more context, I decided to make a Google form and send out to my local communities to gauge their ideas of what they believe will be the best deck of this format. I chose a select few: Kashtira, Branded Bestial, Sortoteni, Scareclaw, Sprite, which includes all of its variants like Tri-Brigade and Runic, Fluandaries, Labyrinth, Telement, and Pure Runic Stun. We also did have another option, which is where people could put other options that I didn't personally think of, and it was definitely absolutely not used for any jokes whatsoever. Up on the screen, we have the graph for said results of the poll I had put out. We have a genuine, clear-cut winner out of the 8 decks that I had put up onto the poll that people were able to specifically select. Let's go through each deck, the results that I have, as well as me giving some personal opinions about what I think this deck will be doing this format, as well as how potent I believe it will be. Let us start with the one we certainly all expected, Kashtira. To the surprise of literally fucking no one, we have one of the top 3 contenders of this poll, which is the deck that will most likely be ruling the format, Kashtira. A deck that can banish shit face down, locks all your main zones, rips monsters out of your extra deck. You get the idea. This deck does a lot, considering we have seen shits like this at YCS Las Vegas.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
And trust me, this deck is certainly something, being able to trigger its main monster, Kashtira Shangri-Ira, multiple times per chain, with Diabolos as the Mind Hacker and its other more offensive boss monster, Kashtira Reinhardt, which has a once per turn banish face down and a once per chain attached from banish, which, considering this is once per chain, it acts in a very similar way to Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess, which starts to make problems very, very quickly with a banish-oriented format like the one we're going into. Capping all this off, we have plenty of more main deck monsters, as the normal summon Kashtira Reinhardt, being a 1-card Reinhardt, as well as a Runic tip, and just being overall bullshit, Kashtira Scareclaw, which can attack in defense position like super heavy samurais, as well as being a quick effect like a Bestial, and a Dark Ruler, or more specifically an Imperm when it attacks a monster. And finally, Kashtira Telements, which gives them access to more graveyard plays in addition to contributing to their field spell buff, which I didn't know until I read the damn card. This deck has a lot going on for it. I could make a video on this deck alone, and nothing else from PHOTON HYPERNOVA. There'd be so much to unpack that it would probably be something a lot of people would like to watch. But in terms of this deck being the best, most likely. If a deck is running the format like this right now, I see it being around for a very long time before Konami says, fuck you and your fucking $1,000 deck, and hit it on the ban list like they did with Tyr. Following the first best deck, we have the deck that comes in second place, Branded Bestial. Branded as a deck has been around for a decent amount of time now, since the 14th of April last year. So about just under a year old, and despite it being a relatively young deck in terms of its age, it has had more support from its inception than any other deck to my knowledge, getting more and more per set since it became a proper meta contender about a week or so later, when everyone, including myself, jumped on the train to see what all the hype was about. Starting from a literal structure deck that gave us one of the most busted fusion spells to date in the form of Branded Fusion, eventually giving it their own archetypal DD Crow in the form of the Bestials, and then even more fusions from the most recent set, which is literally Kit in a fucking Megazord and the definition of a Dead Space Xenomorph. And despite everything I have literally just said, we are getting more. A goddamn Synchro Monster. 2 in fact, more Bestials, more fusion spells, traps, the list seems to never end. Like Kashtira, I can make an entirely separate video on this deck in the multiple ways that you can play it, from its very base version to the more competitive version that literally have the definition of fuck you, you can't play. And seeing this deck time and time again properly fuck shit up post Power of the Elements format, post Magnificent Mavens format, where Elements literally ran it time and time again, it seems to do literally everything and more than we expect. And since Tyr was literally nuked, this deck is very much going to be seen a lot more this format. Better than Kashtira? Maybe. It might be seen more because there's more variants, but certainly not better. Like Kashtira, this deck will be seen more specifically at higher levels of play, and even then, the simpler versions, like 3 structure decks, or the more older versions, so to say, the Branded Despia, will allow people to experiment and go down their own routes with the deck, and probably even see really good results at like locals and certainly regional levels if you learn how to properly play it. Another top contender for best deck of the format has certainly made it rise in popularity again. That is Sword Soul Tenyi. Ever since Burst of Destiny format, Sword Soul has been a deck that's, well, been around the block a lot. Some decks do outclass it quite a lot, like Branded and Kashtira, but it seems to hold up time and time again while being able to play through plenty of negates, and with Tyr now being nuked and certainly not being in the format, it seems to be coming up more and more. For context, Sword Soul recently came back into the limelight with YCS Sydney this year, where a Bestial Sword Soul list jumped into top 32 while in the Shizu Tearlament format, which made a lot of people pick up their old deck, and a lot of new people pick up the deck with the reprint from Magnificent Mavens a couple months prior. And honestly, Sword Soul hasn't really got too many complicated changes, combos, or even support for that matter going for it. Apart from one new card in PHOTON HYPERNOVA, which I'm honestly unsure if Sword Soul's even playing, but they are playing the new Ice Jade Synchro, which makes Kashtira its bitch, and it can be certainly easily made with the Sword Soul token, as well as Moyi, Taya, and any deck that can make level 8s with water monsters. But Sword Soul is not a bad deck by any stretch of the imagination, but I personally believe that it would be the weakest of the format when it comes to playing it. But I will gladly be proven wrong by multiple people and multiple tops within the future months. We certainly have a surprise for another top contender for the format, and it's certainly one that a lot of people, including myself, didn't expect. That's the mommy version of Eldritch, Labyrinth. To put it simply, I know fucking nothing about this deck and how it works. I do, however, know that this deck has a lot of potential to become the next Eldritch in terms of playability, as well as in addition to keeping up with Mon decks like Branded, Kashtira, and the previously mentioned Sword Soul. In addition to apparently having a crazy grind game, as well as not needing any time for shitty fucking floodgates. to make the deck better and do well consistently. So if anyone would like to talk to me about the deck and such, feel free to message me on any of my social medias, which will be listed at the end of the video. However, that does not mean I haven't heard about the deck being spoken time and time again by multiple people online and in my local communities. So I am excited to see where this deck goes this format, because a lot of the time we don't have a trap deck in the format, barring Eldritch, which is now really gone out of favour because obviously Kashtira and Bestials exist. To round off the general consensus, there were some people who thought that Sprite and Runic Stun strategies could be on the up again. And realistically, that is true, but these decks do struggle a lot with the current matchups against a lot of decks that will most likely rule the format, but will certainly make appearances where it will matter the most to their communities in the larger Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG community. But yeah, now let us talk about some underdog decks that I personally think will be really, really good this format. As previously seen, a lot of people have a wide diverse opinion on what they believe this format will consist of at high levels of competitive play. Do I generally agree with the consensus? Kind of, but I would like to give my own 2 cents on what I believe will be working for this format, as well as some underdog decks that I personally think will do a lot better in this format in comparison to the last one. No one online is talking about this deck, and I feel like it's being very, very underrated, this format, even more so than Sprite, which seems to be the underdog of the format with the Elf ban, and that is Scareclaw. It is a deck I have personally been labbing for this format, and my lord of Christ of fucking life, does it do a lot to control the game state. The main boss monster, Scareclaw Tryhard, is a literal Baguska-style towers that is unaffected by Baguska, which is a massive thing in the current metagame where a lot of decks are level 4 based and a lot of them can make Baguska, like Exorcisters and Conclave control. And a lot of the waves of support that we've been getting from Power of the Elements, which gave the deck a literal Balinx and an Onion Ear, as well as Photon HYPERNOVA, giving it its own searchable Kashtira, as well as its own continuous spell that turns an already large fucking Baguska-style towers into a fucking Avramax cross-final Sigma. The deck has only a minimum of 23 main deck cards and 6 extra deck cards for its engine, which allows for a lot of fuck around and find out to see where this deck can go. I am personally going with the pure variant, but eventually I would like to go with the brave variant. And the only reason I'm not doing Kashtira is because that shit expensive and I have some dignity. I'm not coping, you are. Virtuold is a deck this format that has a lot of potential to work well, as it also works off of the Banish Zone, having multiple ways to recycle its cards from said Banish Zone, face up with its Virtuold Trap, Chuche, face down with Virtuold, and as well as being a really good grind deck against a lot of decks that get rid of your shit in multiple ways. Shen Shen is an amazing card as it sets up your own Banish Zone for later plays with Chuche and King Long, as well as being a really good toolbox deck that can take advantage of a lot of floodgates like Invoked Caligar and its own boss monster, in addition to playing multiple clearing fuck you cards like Sword Soul Chaining, Utopia Beyond, and a card that any XC's deck can play, and most likely will, Zeus. We're getting a rank 9 in Cyberstorm Access, which is kind of mid, but we need the 4th Virtual Gate. Please, Konami, please just give us the 4th one, please. I will be honest, I don't know as much about Plunder as I feel like I should, but I've heard multiple things from multiple people about how the deck is actually really, really good when it comes to its own resource management and resource loops, as well as making proper and good use of the Brave engine more than most decks. As well as now, to my knowledge of recently learning, they now play a small Bahamut Shark Toad package. I have also heard about the new Earth ship from Photon HYPERNOVA multiple times, so I'm excited to see how this deck holds up in the meta if at all. I would very much like to see this deck top multiple regionals and even get some people talking about, oh, this could be the deck of the format for a lot of people who don't want to play Kashtira. I am sure that we will most likely be seeing other decks coming into the format very soon with new releases. Some other couple of decks I would like to mention would be Pearly, Dinos, Bird Up, and Springans. Some other decks will come in, but they will most likely be when they are properly updated with eventual releases. Just remember that things like this will most likely change with new releases, as well as higher event tops. I would like to talk about the previously mentioned decks that are actually getting new support, like Pearly with their 2nd main deck monster and their 6th quick play spell in Cyberstorm Access in May, Dinos getting generic support in a future set called Wild Survivors in the form of the Transcend Drake monsters, and finally getting Bird Up, a possible new spell in the form of Tri-Brigade Roar, which is also in the previously mentioned Cyberstorm Access. So there was a possibility that these decks will see competitive play within the coming months. That'll be all from me for now. If you would like to see more discussion videos, please be sure to drop a like and leave a subscription, as it would be very helpful for me to gauge the fact that you guys would like to see more. Also, be sure to comment and join in on the discussion, as I would love to see opinions outside of my local communities. Have a good one, stay safe, and happy dueling. Catch you later.